Have you ever made a decision that you knew, the exact second you made it, would ruin your life? For me, it wasn't walking down a dark street or taking a dangerous job. It was answering a phone call. Just 15 minutes. That's the difference between freedom and captivity. 15 minutes ago, I was serving wine to VIPs. Now, I am trapped in the back of a black SUV, shivering next to a man whose name makes grown men tremble. Julian Thorne. He offered me a choice, a wedding ring or a bullet, a golden cage or a shallow grave. I took the ring. I thought I was just acting a part to save my brother. I didn't know that by the time the contract ended, the girl I used to be would be dead, and something else, something darker, sharper, and more dangerous, would take her place. This is the story of how I became the queen of a criminal empire. And trust me, the crown is heavier than it looks. The Chicago wind does not just blow in January, it bites. It sinks its teeth into your skin and tears right down to the bone. But the cold was the last thing on my mind as I burst out the heavy steel door of Bellissimo into the alleyway. My breath came in short, frantic clouds of white vapor. My fingers were numb, not from the temperature, but from the sheer terror pumping through my veins. I just needed to get to the subway station. If I could just make it to the subway, I would be safe. I would disappear into the crowd. I would be just another invisible girl in a city of millions. I took one step onto the slushy gray snow, and then the world exploded in light. High beams. Blinding white LED lights cut through the darkness, freezing me in place like a deer on a highway. A massive black SUV was idling right across the narrow exit, blocking my path completely. The engine purred with a low, menacing rumble that vibrated in my chest. Before I could even turn around to run back inside, the passenger door flew open. A mountain of a man stepped out. This had to be Marco. Even in the dim light, I could see the jagged scar running down his cheek, disappearing into his thick collar. He moved with terrifying speed for someone his size. He did not speak. He did not hesitate. He simply marched toward me like a machine programmed to destroy. I backed up until my spine hit the freezing brick wall of the restaurant. "Please," I whispered, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. Then the rear door of the SUV opened. The air in the alleyway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Julian Thorne stepped out. He was exactly as the whispers described him, only worse. He was taller than I expected, wearing a black wool coat that probably cost more than my entire life's earnings. His leather gloves were black. His eyes were black. He looked like the Grim Reaper dressed by Armani. He did not run. He did not shout. He walked toward me with the casual arrogance of a man who owns the pavement beneath his feet. He stopped 3 feet away, just close enough for me to smell him. Sandalwood tobacco and something metallic like fresh rain on a gun barrel. "Search her," Julian said. His voice was low, smooth, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Take the phone." "No, wait," I gasped, but Marco was already on me. He shoved me against the bricks. My cheek scraped against the rough stone. I felt his large hands patting down my sides, checking my pockets, checking the waistband of my skirt. It was a violation, a humiliation that made bile rise in my throat. But I could not move. I was pinned. "Get off me!" I cried out, struggling uselessly. "Hold still," Marco grunted. As I was pressed there with the snow seeping into my shoes, my mind flashed back to the moment that had doomed me. 15 minutes ago, just 15 minutes. I was inside the warm golden glow of the VIP section. Crystal glasses were clinking. The smell of truffle risotto and expensive red wine filled the air. I was pouring a vintage Barolo for table number 4. Julian Thorne sat at the head of the table, silent, watchful. Across from him sat a man from the Viti family, a rival faction everyone knew about but no one mentioned. My phone had vibrated in my apron pocket. I should have ignored it, but it was the private line for the hospital. My brother. It was always about my brother. I had stepped back into the shadows near the service station and answered. Pronto, I had whispered, answering in Italian out of habit. My grandmother Nona had raised us on the dialect of Napoli, and it was the language of my heart. The nurse was on the other line telling me his fever had spiked. I was arguing softly in that rapid-clipped Neapolitan slang, pleading for them to give him the medication until my shift ended. That was when I heard it. The man from the Viti family was leaning toward his wrist, speaking into a smart watch. He thought the ambient noise covered him. He thought no one in an American restaurant would understand the thick street slang of Naples. Thorne dies tonight, the man had whispered in Italian. When he steps out the back door, the team is ready. My blood had turned to ice. I looked at Julian Thorne. He was taking a sip of wine, completely unaware that he had less than an hour to live. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. I was nobody, just a waitress with debt and a dying brother. But I looked at Julian's profile, the sharp jawline, the isolated power he radiated, and I made a choice. A stupid, reckless human choice. I grabbed the check folder. I pulled out a pen. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely write. Do not go out the back, ambush. I wrote it in English. I slipped the receipt under his wine glass, making sure the text was facing up. Then I turned and walked away. I did not wait for a tip. I did not clock out. I just ran. Back in the alleyway, the memory shattered as Marco pulled my phone from my pocket. Got it, boss, Marco said, stepping back. I slumped against the wall, gasping for air. Julian Thorne stepped into the space Marco had vacated. He was so close now that his shadow consumed me. He looked down at me and I felt like a butterfly pinned under glass. You speak the dialect of Naples, Julian said. It was not a question. I learned from my grandmother, I stammered, my teeth chattering. I am not with them, I swear. I just wanted to warn you. He studied my face. His eyes were like dark tunnels searching for a lie. In his world, kindness did not exist. In his world, a warning was just a trap set by a different hunter. He thinks I am a double agent. The thought terrified me more than the cold. Get in the car, Elena, Julian commanded. I shook my head, backing away until I had nowhere left to go. No, please, I have to go home. My brother is waiting. I said, get in the car. He did not raise his voice, but the command vibrated through my bones. Marco opened the back door of the SUV, waiting like a silent sentry. I looked at the empty street. No one was coming to save me. I had intervened in the affairs of lions, and now I was just another piece of meat. With trembling legs, I climbed into the back seat. The leather was soft and smelled of new money. Julian slid in next to me. The door slammed shut with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid closing. The lock clicked. The warmth of the car hit me, but I felt colder than ever. Julian reached into his inner coat pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was he reaching for a gun? Was this it? Instead, he pulled out a piece of paper. It was the receipt, the cheap thermal paper from the restaurant with my jagged handwriting scrawled across the bottom. Do not go out the back. Ambush. He held it up between two long, elegant fingers. Then, with his other hand, he flicked open a silver lighter. The flame danced in the reflection of his dark eyes. He held the flame to the corner of the receipt. We both watched in silence as the fire curled the paper, turning my warning into black ash. The smell of burning paper filled the small space, choking me. When the paper was nothing but dust, he brushed his hands clean and turned to look at me properly for the first time. His gaze was intense, heavy, possessive. You saved my life, Elena, he said softly. I swallowed hard, a tiny spark of hope igniting in my chest. So you will let me go? A dark, humorless smile touched the corner of his lips. No, he whispered. That was the biggest mistake of your life. He leaned in closer until his lips were inches from my ear. Because you know too much. You are a loose end, and I do not leave loose ends. The car engine revved as the driver pulled away from the curb, merging into the snowy Chicago night. I watched the lights of the restaurant fade away into the distance. You are not going home tonight, Elena, Julian said, staring straight ahead. My breath hitched. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and stinging. If a mafia boss told you that you were never going home, what would you do? Would you scream? Would you fight? Or would you freeze, just like I did? If you are listening to this in the dark double, check your locks. Tell me in the comments below where you are right now so I know you are safe. And do not forget to subscribe because what happens in the next hour is a nightmare I never could have imagined. The silence inside the SUV was heavier than the snow piling up on the streets of Chicago. It was a suffocating physical weight. I sat pressed against the leather door, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the man in the wool coat. Julian Thorne did not look at me. He was typing on his phone, his thumbs moving with lethal precision. The glow of the screen illuminated his face, casting sharp shadows across his cheekbones, making him look more like a marble statue than a man of flesh and blood. We drove for 20 minutes. I watched the city blur past the familiar grimy streets of my neighborhood, giving way to the gleaming steel canyons of the Loop. We pulled into the underground garage of Thorne Tower, a building I had only ever seen from the window of the subway train. It pierced the sky, a black needle in the heart of the city. "Get out," Julian said. I followed him to a private elevator. There were no buttons inside, only a retinal scanner. He leaned in, a beam of red light scanned his eye, and the doors slid shut with a hiss. My ears popped as we shot upward. 30 floors, 40, 50. When the doors opened, I gasped. It was not an apartment. It was a glass cage floating in the sky. The penthouse was enormous, spanning the entire top floor. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, revealing the entire glittering sprawl of Chicago beneath us. But it was cold. So incredibly cold. The furniture was sparse, modern, and white. There were no personal photos, no knickknacks, no signs of life. It felt like a museum or a mausoleum. "Take off your coat," Julian commanded. He walked to a sleek black table and set down his phone. I hesitated, clutching the lapels of my cheap thrift store parka. "Why?" He turned slowly. His patience was a terrifying thing. "Because, Elena, I do not know if you are wearing a wire. I do not know if you have a tracker sewn into the lining of that coat. And until I know you are clean, you do not take another step into my sanctuary." My fingers fumbled with the zipper. I shrugged off the coat and let it drop to the floor. Underneath, I was wearing my work uniform, a white button-down shirt stained with wine from the shift and a black skirt. "The bag, too," he said. I dropped my purse. Julian reached into a drawer and pulled out a black wand, a handheld metal detector. He switched it on and it let out a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. "Come here." I walked toward him, my legs feeling like lead. He stood in the center of the room, the city lights creating a halo behind him. When I was arm's length away, he raised the wand. "Arms out," he ordered. I lifted my arms. He began at my wrists. The wand hummed as it passed over my watch. He paused, gripping my wrist to check the underside of the strap. His skin was hot, dry, and rough. My pulse hammered against his thumb. He lingered there a second too long, his dark eyes meeting mine. "You are terrified," he observed softly. I could smell him again, that mix of expensive scotch and danger. "You kidnapped me," I whispered. "I detained you, there is a difference." He moved the wand down my side, over my ribs, down to my hips. He was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. It was invasive. It was humiliating, but it was also confusing. My body reacted to his proximity, betraying my fear with a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. He knelt down, checking my legs, my ankles, my shoes. "Turn around." I obeyed. He swept the wand over my back. When it reached the small of my back, he paused. I held my breath. He did not touch me. Not really, but the air between us crackled with a tension that felt like a lit fuse. He stood up and switched off the device. The silence rushed back in. "Clean," he murmured. He walked to the bar and poured himself a drink, amber liquid splashing over a square of ice. He did not offer me one. "Sit." I sat on the edge of a white leather sofa. I felt dirty in this pristine room. I felt like a stain he would have to scrub out later. "Tell me exactly what you heard in the restaurant," Julian said, turning to face me. "And do not lie. If you lie, I will know." I took a shaky breath. "I told you. The man with the scar on his eyebrow." He was talking into his watch. "He said Thorne dies tonight. He said the team was ready at the back exit." Julian took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim of the glass. "And you understood this perfectly? Neapolitan dialect is fast. It is messy. Most Italians do not even understand it." "My grandmother was from the Spanish quarter of Naples," I said defensively. "She raised me. It was the first language I spoke." Julian tilted his head. He looked like a predator examining a particularly interesting rabbit. "Let us test that," he said. He switched effortlessly to Italian, but his accent was flawless, almost aristocratic. Il tuo accento è buono, ma la grammatica è dei poveri. Your accent is good, but the grammar is for the poor. I bristled. La lingua è per comunicare, non per impressionare. Language is for communicating, not for impressing. He smirked. Then he said rapidly, Se io avessi saputo che tu eri lì, io non avrei parlato. If I had known you were there, I would not have spoken. I frowned. He had made a mistake, a subtle one. Se avessi saputo, I corrected automatically without thinking. Not se io avessi. You do not need the pronoun there. It is redundant. The moment the words left my mouth, I froze. Julian's smile widened, but it did not reach his eyes. Got you. He set his glass down. You corrected me. Only a native speaker or someone fluent enough to think in the language would catch that slip in the heat of the moment. You are useful, Elena. He walked over to the table and picked up a manila folder. He tossed it onto the coffee table in front of me. It landed with a heavy thud. Open it. My hands trembled as I lifted the cover. The first thing I saw was a photo of my brother Lucas lying in his hospital bed hooked up to the ventilator. The air left my lungs. How did you get this? Keep looking, Julian said, his voice devoid of emotion. The next page was a copy of his medical bills. Over $200,000 in debt. The page after that was a photo of my apartment building. Then my credit report. Then a police report from 3 years ago when my father died drunk behind the wheel. You have been busy, I whispered, nausea swirling in my stomach. Information is the only currency that matters, Julian said. I know everything, Elena Vance. I know you dropped out of law school to pay for Lucas's heart treatments. I know you work double shifts and steal leftovers from the kitchen to save on groceries. I know you are drowning. He leaned forward, bracing his hands on his knees, bringing his face level with mine. And I know that without the experimental treatment at St. Jude's, Lucas has maybe 3 months to live. Tears spilled over my cheeks hot and fast. You are a monster. I am a businessman, Julian corrected, and I am making you an offer. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city he ruled. The men who tried to kill me tonight belong to the Vitti family. They are old school, superstitious. They trust family, and they trust blood. They are hosting a gala this Saturday. I need to be inside that gala. I need to get close to Lorenzo Vitti, the son, but they will not talk business with me. They think I am just an American thug. He turned back to me, his silhouette framed by the lights. But if I walk in there with a fiancé who speaks their language, who understands their customs, who looks innocent enough to be ignored, then I become invisible. They will speak freely around you because they are misogynists who think women are furniture. You will be my ears, Elena. I shook my head, standing up. No, I am not playing spy for the mafia. I am going home. Julian picked up his phone. He tapped the screen once. Who are you calling? I asked, panic rising in my throat. The hospital administrator, Julian said calmly. I am the biggest donor to that wing. 1 word from me and Lucas is discharged. Tonight. They will put him on the street. My heart stopped. You would not. He is 16. He is on a ventilator. Try me. The cruelty in his eyes was absolute. He was not bluffing. He would kill a boy just to prove a point. I rushed forward, grabbing his arm. Stop, please do not. He looked down at my hand on his sleeve. I snatched it back as if I had touched fire. I will do it, I sobbed, my spirit breaking. I will do whatever you want. Just leave him alone. Julian lowered the phone. Good choice. He stepped closer, grabbing my chin and tilting my face up to his. His thumb brushed away a tear on my cheek, a gesture that felt shockingly intimate after his threat. I believe you are not a spy, Elena, but you know the face of the man who ordered the hit on me. If I let you go, they will find you. They will torture you to get to me. His eyes locked onto mine, mesmerizing and terrifying. You have only one path to survival. You become Mrs. Julian Thorne, or at least you pretend to be, starting right now. I stood in the center of the penthouse, shivering not from the cold, but from the aftershocks of the deal I had just made with the devil. So I am your prisoner, I said, my voice hollow. Julian slipped his phone into his pocket. You are my guest, my partner, and for the next 3 months the love of my life. Try to look happier about it. He walked over to the wet bar and poured another drink. This time he poured 2. He handed me a glass of amber liquid. Drink. You look like you are going to pass out, and I do not carry unconscious women. I took the glass and downed it in one burn. The whiskey hit my empty stomach like liquid fire, but it steadied my hands. Why me? I asked. You could hire a professional, an actress, a spy. Julian swirled his drink, looking into the depths of the liquor. My mother is dying. I blinked, surprised by the sudden shift. What? She is in a care facility upstate. She has dementia. For the last 5 years, she has been asking when I will settle down, when I will bring a nice girl home. The Vitti family. They respect family values above all else. If I appear to be a man settling down honoring his mother's wish, it disarms them. It makes me look weak, sentimental. And when your enemy thinks you are weak, that is when you strike. So I am a prop, I said bitterly. A bait. Exactly. He set his glass down. But to sell this lie, we need to be convincing. He looked at his watch. It is 3 a.m. The team will be here in 10 minutes. Team? The elevator chimed. The doors slid open, and 4 people marched in, pushing racks of clothes, carrying silver makeup cases and hair equipment. They did not look at me. They did not speak to me. They moved with military efficiency. Make her look expensive, Julian ordered, sitting on the white sofa, crossing his long legs. Not like a model, like a queen, someone who was born into this life. For the next 3 hours, I was poked, prodded, and painted. They stripped me of my waitress uniform. They scrubbed my skin until it was raw. They plucked my eyebrows. They dyed my hair a richer, deeper shade of chocolate. I stood in front of a full-length mirror wearing nothing but a silk robe while a seamstress pinned a dress to my body. Julian watched the entire time. He did not look away. He drank his scotch and issued commands like he was building a weapon, not dressing a woman. Higher on the slit, he said, pointing his glass. She has good legs. Show them. The seamstress ripped the seam open. Redder on the lips, he criticized. She needs to look dangerous, not sweet. By the time the sun began to bleed gray light over Lake Michigan, I did not recognize the woman in the mirror. She was beautiful. Terrifyingly beautiful. Her hair fell in glossy waves. Her skin was luminous. The dress was a deep blood-red silk that clung to every curve, leaving nothing to the imagination, yet concealing everything. Julian stood up. He walked behind me, looking at my reflection in the mirror. Better, he murmured. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside sat a diamond so large it looked fake. It was a vintage cut set in dark platinum, surrounded by tiny rubies that looked like drops of blood. My grandmother's ring, Julian said. He took my left hand. His fingers were cool. He slid the ring onto my finger. It slid over my knuckle and settled there heavy and cold. It fit perfectly. How? I whispered. How does it fit? I have an eye for sizing, Julian said, his voice low against my ear. He did not let go of my hand. He held it up, admiring the stone on my finger. Listen to me closely, Elena. This ring is worth more than your life. It is worth more than your brother's life. It is a target. When people see this ring, they know you belong to me. He turned me around so I was facing him. The smell of expensive grooming products and stale whiskey was intoxicating. Do not take it off, do not lose it, because if you do... He let the threat hang in the air. He reached behind him to the small of his back and pulled out a gun. It was small, black, and sleek, a Glock 43. I recoiled, stepping back. I do not want that. Take it. He grabbed my hand and forced the gun into my palm. It was heavier than it looked. The metal was freezing against my skin. Being my fiancé puts a target on your back, he said, his face grim. The Vitti family does not play by the rules. If they find out who you really are, if they corner you, you need to be able to end it. Bull. End them? I asked, my voice trembling. He looked at me with those abyssal black eyes. Or yourself before they take you. He guided my hand, showing me the safety. You have 24 hours to learn our backstory. Where we met. The name of your imaginary dog. And how to use this. He stepped back, looking at me. The dress, the ring, the gun. Because if you miss Elena, if you hesitate, the only person going into the ground will be you. The Field Museum of Chicago was transformed. The dinosaurs and ancient fossils were bathed in purple and gold light. Waiters in white tuxedos moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. A live jazz band played somewhere in the distance, the saxophone wailing like a crying woman. The air smelled of money, old money, the kind of money that did not scream but whispered. I stepped out of the limousine, my heels clicking on the pavement. The January wind tried to bite through my silk dress, but I did not shiver. I was too terrified to feel the cold. Julian stepped out beside me. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He looked devastating, handsome in a way that made your mouth dry and your instincts scream run. He offered me his arm. "Smile, Bella," he murmured. "You are the happiest woman in Chicago tonight." I took his arm. His muscles were hard as rock beneath the fine wool. We walked up the grand staircase. Cameras flashed, blinding me. I forced my lips into a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "Stay close," Julian whispered, his lips barely moving. "My hand will be on your waist. If I squeeze twice, it means stop talking. If I squeeze once, it means we leave. Immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes," I breathed. We entered the main hall. It was a sea of sharks in designer clothing. Julian navigated the crowd with the grace of a predator swimming through a reef. He introduced me to bankers, politicians, and judges. I played my part, the shy, adoring fiancé. I laughed at their bad jokes. I flashed the ring. But my ears were open. I was listening. Every time Julian stopped to talk, I strained to hear the conversations at the tables nearby. Two men in gray suits by the bar. "The shipment is delayed at the docks." A woman in emerald earrings whispering to her husband. "Thorne is getting bold showing up here." Then I saw him. Lorenzo Vitti. He was standing near the T-Rex skeleton holding a glass of red wine. He was younger than Julian, maybe my age. He was handsome in a traditional Italian way. Curly dark hair, olive skin, bedroom eyes. But there was something wrong with his smile. It was too wide, too wet. He saw us. He walked straight toward us, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. "Julian," I felt his hand tighten on my waist. A warning. "Thorne Lorenzo," said his voice smooth like oil. "I did not think you would come. After the unpleasantness the other night." Julian smiled. A shark's smile. "I do not know what you mean, Lorenzo. I had a very peaceful night." Lorenzo's eyes flicked to me. They raked over my body, lingering on the slit of my dress, then on my chest, then finally landing on my face. It felt like being touched by slimy hands. "And who is this vision?" Lorenzo asked. "My fiancé Julian," said, his tone turning icy. "Elena." Elena. Lorenzo took my hand before I could pull away. He brought it to his lips, but he did not kiss it. He just breathed on my skin. Enchanted. "May I have this dance?" Lorenzo asked. I stiffened. Julian's hand squeezed my waist. Once, twice. He wanted to say no, but to refuse would be an insult. It would cause a scene. "Of course," Julian said, his voice tight. "But bring her back. She gets tired easily." Lorenzo pulled me onto the dance floor. The band began to play a slow waltz. Lorenzo pulled me close, too close. His hand on my back was sweaty. He smelled of heavy musk and something sour like old wine. "You are beautiful, Elena," he said in English. "Too beautiful for a dog like Thorne." I smiled stiffly. Julian is a good man. Lorenzo laughed. A cruel barking sound. Good men do not own half the city's vice. He spun me around. As my back turned to the crowd, he leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. And then he spoke, not in English, not in standard Italian, but in the thick, rapid street slang of the Spanish Quarter. "Tu puzzi di paura, piccerella. Quanto ti ha pagato Thorne per fare la puttana stasera?" "You smell of fear, little one. How much did Thorne pay you to play the whore tonight?" My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was the test. If I reacted, if I flinched, if I showed even a flicker of understanding, he would know. He would know I was the one who intercepted the call. He would know I was the loose end. I forced my face to remain blank, a mask of confused innocence. I blinked, pulling back slightly to look at him. "I am sorry?" I asked in my flat American accent. "The music is so loud." "Did you say something about the wine?" Lorenzo stared at me. His dark eyes searched mine, looking for the lie. I held his gaze. I thought of my brother. I thought of the debt. I thought of the gun strapped to my thigh under the silk. "I only speak English," I said apologetically. "And a little high school Spanish. Hola?" I gave a silly little giggle. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. For a second, I thought he was going to snap my neck right there on the dance floor. Then he relaxed. The suspicion faded, replaced by dismissal. He thought I was just a dumb American trophy wife. "My mistake," he said in English. "I said you look divine." The song ended. I pulled away instantly. "I need the ladies' room," I said, breathless. "Excuse me." I did not wait for his answer. I turned and walked as fast as I could without running toward the corridor. I needed to breathe. I needed to wash the feel of his hands off my skin. I pushed into the women's restroom. It was empty, thank God. White marble gold fixtures, silence. I rushed to the sink, splashing cold water on my face. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the tap off. Calm down, Elena, you did it. He believed you. I grabbed a paper towel, drying my face. Then I saw it. In the mirror, the reflection of the last stall door. It was slightly ajar, and on the floor, protruding just an inch into the main room, was a hand. A woman's hand, pale, lifeless, wearing a catering server's bracelet. I spun around, gasping. I walked slowly toward the stall. "Hello," I whispered. "Are you okay?" I pushed the door open. The scream died in my throat. It was one of the waitresses. Her throat had been slit. She was stuffed awkwardly onto the toilet, her eyes wide open, staring at nothing. Blood was pooled on the white tile, thick and dark. I stumbled back, my hand covering my mouth. Panic exploded in my brain. I had to get out. I had to find Julian. I turned to the exit. Click. The sound of the main door lock turning. I froze. Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Slow, deliberate, not the click of heels. The heavy thud of men's dress shoes. Someone was in here. Someone had followed me. I looked at the dead girl. Then I looked at the gap under the stall door. The footsteps stopped. Then a voice spoke low and mocking in that same Neapolitan dialect. "So che sei lì. E so che hai capito tutto, puttanella." I know you are in there. And I know you understood everything, little whore. It was not Lorenzo. It was the man from the restaurant, the one with the scar. He began to kick open the stall doors one by one. Bang! First stall. Bang! Second stall. I was in the last one with the body. I had left my gun in my purse, which I had left at the table with Julian because it ruined the line of the dress. I was trapped, with a corpse, and a killer was 2 doors away. You're in the restroom with a dead body. And the killer is right outside the door, just steps away. Elena doesn't have a gun. She left it outside. The front door is locked. What should she do, scream or use the body as a shield? Comment your solution below. I really need your opinions. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel immediately, because in the next part, Julian will show you why he's called the Devil of Chicago. You won't want to miss that bloody scene. The lock of the stall door shattered with a single brutal kick. Wood splintered and flew inward, striking my arm, but I did not feel the pain. I was pure adrenaline, pure terror. The man with the scar stood there, filling the doorway. He was huge. In the confined space of the bathroom stall, he looked like a nightmare made flesh. He grinned, revealing yellow teeth. "Found you, Puttanella." He lunged. I did not scream. I did not freeze. I thought of Lucas lying in that hospital bed, helpless without me, and a feral rage exploded in my chest. As his meaty hands reached for my throat, I swung my purse with every ounce of strength I had. It was heavy, filled with my phone keys and a small bottle of mineral water. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening thud. He grunted, stumbling back a step, but he did not fall. He shook his head like a bear shaking off a bee sting. "Bitch," he growled. He grabbed my hair, yanking my head back so hard I saw stars. Pain seared through my scalp. I gasped, clawing at his wrist, but his grip was iron. He slammed me against the stall partition. The metal divider rattled and bent under the impact. I reached into my purse, fumbling blindly. My fingers closed around the travel-sized bottle of mineral water spray. It was not pepper spray. It was useless, expensive water. But it was all I had. I aimed for his eyes and sprayed. It was a pathetic defense. He blinked, roaring in annoyance more than pain, but it bought me a second. Just 1 second. I lifted my leg and drove the heel of my stiletto straight down onto the arch of his foot. 4 inches of steel spike piercing leather and flesh. He howled, releasing my hair. I scrambled past him, slipping on the blood that was already pooling on the floor from the dead girl. I made it 2 steps toward the main door. Then a hand closed around my ankle. I fell hard, my chin hitting the marble floor. The impact jarred my teeth. He dragged me back across the slippery tiles like a rag doll. I kicked, I clawed at the grout lines, breaking my nails until they bled. "No!" I screamed. "Get off me!" He flipped me over, pinning me down with his massive weight. His hands were around my throat, instantly squeezing. Air. I needed air. Black spots danced in my vision. His face was inches from mine, red and sweaty, his eyes full of murderous intent. "Say hello to the devil for me," he hissed. My lungs burned, my vision tunneled, the sounds of the jazz band outside faded into a high-pitched ringing. I was going to die here, on a bathroom floor next to a stranger's corpse. Then the bathroom door exploded inward. It wasn't opened, it was kicked off its hinges. Julian Thorne burst into the room. He did not look like the elegant businessman in the tuxedo anymore. He looked like death. His eyes were wide, wild, completely devoid of humanity. He saw me pinned on the floor and a sound ripped from his throat, a guttural, animalistic roar that made the tiles vibrate. The man on top of me looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. Thorne. He tried to reach for the gun inside his jacket. Too late. Julian was on him. He did not use a gun. He did not seek cover. He launched himself through the air, tackling the man off me with the force of a freight train. They crashed into the sinks, shattering the porcelain. Water sprayed everywhere, mixing with the blood on the floor. I scrambled back, coughing, gasping for air, my hand flying to my bruised throat. "Get up!" Julian roared at me, not looking away from his enemy. The man with the scar swung a heavy fist, connecting with Julian's jaw. Julian's head snapped back, but he didn't even slow down. He grabbed the man's head and slammed it into the broken remains of the sink. Once, twice. Crunch. The sound of bone breaking echoed in the tiled room. But the scar-faced man was tough. He pulled a knife from his belt, slashing wildly. The blade cut through the sleeve of Julian's tuxedo, slicing into his arm. Blood. Julian's blood splattered onto the white floor. Julian did not flinch. He caught the man's wrist, twisting it until something snapped. The knife clattered to the floor. Then, with a movement so fast I almost missed it, a silver blade appeared in Julian's hand. It slid out from his sleeve like a magician's trick. He drove the blade into the man's neck. It was not clean. It was not quick. It was messy and brutal and intimate. Hot blood sprayed out in an arterial arc, coating Julian's white shirt, coating his face. It sprayed onto me, painting red speckles across the hem of my silk dress. The man gurgled, his hands clutching uselessly at his throat. He slumped to the floor, twitching. Julian stood over him, chest heaving. He stabbed him again and again, ensuring he was dead, ensuring he would never touch me again. "Julian, stop!" I screamed, finding my voice. "He is dead!" Julian froze. The knife was still buried in the man's chest. He stared down at the body, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking violently. For a moment I thought he might turn on me. He looked completely lost to the violence. Then he turned his head slowly. His eyes found mine. The madness in them receded, replaced by a terrifying, frantic clarity. Elena. He stepped over the body, disregarding the blood pooling around his expensive shoes. He fell to his knees beside me. His hands, bloody, trembling hands, hovered over me, afraid to touch. "Did he hurt you?" His voice broke, cracking in a way I had never heard. "Where? Show me." "I am fine, Julian," I whispered, though I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. "Just my throat." He saw the red marks, the fingerprints beginning to bruise on my neck. A shudder went through his entire body. He reached out and touched the skin there so lightly it felt like a ghost's caress. "I will kill them all," he whispered. "Everyone who touched you. I will burn this city to the ground." "We have to go," I said, gripping his arm. "The noise. Someone will come." Julian blinked, snapping back to reality. He looked at the carnage around us. 2 dead bodies, shattered porcelain, blood everywhere. Yes, he stood up, pulling me with him. He looked at my dress. The blood was dark against the red silk, but visible. "Take this." He stripped off his ruined tuxedo jacket. Beneath it, his white shirt was soaked in blood, both his and the dead man's. He wrapped the jacket around my shoulders, buttoning it to hide the stains on my dress. "Keep your head down, do not look at anyone." He grabbed my hand. His grip was bruisingly tight. We exited the bathroom. The corridor was still empty, miraculously. The music from the ballroom still played a cheerful, upbeat swing tune, completely oblivious to the slaughter that had just happened 50 feet away. We did not go back to the party. We went straight for the service exit. Julian kicked open the heavy door, and the freezing Chicago air hit us like a physical blow. It was snowing harder now, a blizzard that erased the world in white. His black SUV was waiting, the engine idling. Marco was at the wheel. He took one look at us, Julian covered in blood, me wrapped in a man's coat shivering, and he didn't ask a single question. He just unlocked the doors. Julian shoved me into the back seat and climbed in after me. Go, Marco, now. The car squealed away from the curb, sliding slightly on the ice before gripping the road. I huddled in the corner of the seat, my arms wrapped around myself. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping horror. I had just watched a man die. I had watched Julian butcher him. I looked at Julian. He was staring at his hands, which were coated in drying, sticky blood. He was rubbing them together compulsively, trying to wipe it off, but only smearing it further. Julian? I whispered. He jerked his head toward me. Come here. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. He reached out and pulled me across the seat. I went to him. I should have been terrified. I should have been repulsed. He was covered in death, but I needed him. I needed the heat of his body to prove I was still alive. I collapsed against his chest. I could smell the copper scent of blood mixing with his cologne. I could feel his heart hammering against his ribs like a sledgehammer. I am sorry, he murmured, burying his face in my hair. I am so sorry, Elena. I was too slow. You saved me, I said, my voice muffled against his shirt. He pulled back, gripping my face with his bloody hands. He didn't care about the mess anymore. He looked at me with an intensity that burned. He touched the bruise on my neck again, his thumb tracing the shape of the attacker's finger. His eyes darkened. Lorenzo Vitti signed his death warrant tonight. He swore low and lethal. No one touches what is mine. No one. From this moment on, you do not leave my sight. Not to sleep, not to eat, not to breathe. Do you understand? I looked into the eyes of the monster who had just killed for me. And God help me, I didn't want to run. Yes, I whispered. He leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It wasn't romantic. It was desperate. He tasted of iron and violence. He kissed me like he was trying to breathe life back into me, or maybe trying to steal mine to replace what he had lost. I kissed him back, clinging to his bloody shirt, anchoring myself in the storm. We did not go back to the penthouse. Too exposed, Julian had muttered to Marco, too much glass. We drove north out of the city limits, where the skyscrapers gave way to dense forests and frozen lakes. The blizzard howled around the SUV, turning the world into a tunnel of white. After an hour, we turned down a narrow, unplowed road. A gate opened automatically, and we pulled up to a cabin. It was not a rustic shack. It was a fortress of dark timber and stone sitting on the edge of Lake Michigan, hidden by the trees. Get inside, Julian ordered as Marco stopped the car. We ran through the snow, the wind cutting through my thin dress and Julian's jacket. Inside the cabin was warm, the air smelling of cedar and stale trapped heat. Marco stayed outside, patrolling the perimeter. Julian locked the heavy door behind us, throwing the deadbolt. Then he turned to me. Upstairs, bathroom now. I followed him up the wooden staircase. My legs felt rubbery. The shock was starting to set in, the trembling in my hands becoming violent. The master bathroom was huge, tiled in slate gray stone. Julian turned on the shower, turning the handle all the way to hot. Steam began to fill the room instantly. Take it off, he said. I looked down at myself. The red silk dress was ruined, stiff with dried blood at the hem. My skin felt tight and dirty. I unzipped the dress and let it pool on the floor. I stood there in my underwear, shivering. Julian did not look at my body with lust. He looked at me like a doctor examining a patient, or perhaps a mechanic assessing damage. He stepped closer and began to unbutton his ruined shirt. He peeled it off, revealing a torso carved from muscle and scarred by violence. There was a fresh cut on his arm where the knife had sliced him. It was bleeding sluggishly. Your arm, I said, reaching out. Leave it, he said sharply. He took my hand and led me into the massive walk and shower. The hot water hit us, and I gasped. It stung my bruised skin, but it felt incredible. It felt like it could wash away the memory of the dead man's eyes. Julian picked up a bar of soap. He began to wash my arms. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. He scrubbed the spots where the man had grabbed me. He washed my hands, scrubbing under my fingernails where I had scratched the attacker. I watched him. His face was set in a mask of concentration, but his hands were shaking. Julian, I said softly, you are shaking. He didn't answer. He just scrubbed harder. You have OCD, don't you? I realized. The way you cleaned your hands in the car. The way you need everything ordered. The white apartment. He stopped. He stood there under the spray water running down his dark hair over the sharp planes of his face, mixing with the blood he hadn't washed off himself yet. My father, he said, his voice barely audible over the water. He was a butcher. Not literally, but in the business. He used to come home covered in it, every night. He would sit at the dinner table with it under his fingernails. He looked at his own hands, staring at the pink water swirling down the drain. I swore I would never be dirty like him. I swore I would keep my world clean, sterile. He looked up at me, and the vulnerability in his eyes broke my heart. And tonight, I covered you in it. I dragged you into the filth I spent my life trying to escape. He dropped the soap. He leaned his forehead against mine, closing his eyes. I hated myself for it, Elena. Every drop of blood that touched you felt like acid on my own skin. I reached up, cupping his face. The water slicked our skin, making us slippery. You saved me, Julian. You got dirty so I could stay alive. That is not filth. That is... I couldn't find the word. Love? No, too soon. Too impossible. That is sacrifice, I whispered. He opened his eyes. They were dark, wet, and full of pain. Let me clean you, I said. I picked up the soap. I washed his chest gentle over the old scars. I washed his arms careful around the fresh cut. I washed his hands, interlacing my fingers with his until the water ran clear. We stood there for a long time, just breathing in the steam, holding on to each other. There was no sex. The trauma was too fresh, the exhaustion too deep. But there was intimacy. A raw, stripped-down intimacy that felt more dangerous than any gun. Later, we lay in the massive bed, wrapped in thick down comforters. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. Julian lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. His gun was on the nightstand next to my head. My gun was under my pillow. Why do you do it? I asked into the darkness. If you hate the filth, why stay in the life? Why not take your money and disappear? Julian turned his head on the pillow to look at me. Because monsters exist, Elena. Whether I am here or not. If I leave, someone like Lorenzo Vitti takes over everything. He would flood the streets with drugs, he would traffic women, he would kill without rules. He reached out his hand, finding mine under the covers. I am a monster too, but I am a monster with rules. I keep the chaos contained. I protect what is mine. Like my brother, I said softly. Like your brother. And now, you. I squeezed his hand. You paid his medical bills. You saved him tonight. I would burn the world for him if it meant keeping you safe, he said simply. I fell asleep holding his hand, the gun under my pillow, pressing uncomfortably against my cheek, reminding me that safety was just an illusion. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and impending doom. I went downstairs wearing one of Julian's oversized shirts. He was in the kitchen, staring at a laptop screen. Marco stood by the window, looking out at the snow with binoculars. What is it? I asked, sensing the tension. Julian looked up. His face was back to being a mask of cold indifference, but his eyes were tired. Lorenzo Vitti, he said. He knows we are gone. He has declared war. I poured myself a cup of coffee, my hands steady. War? He has put a bounty on my head. $5 million. Every two-bit thug in Chicago is looking for us right now. That is not the worst part, Marco rumbled from the window. Julian hesitated. Then he turned the laptop screen toward me. It was a live feed from a security camera outside my brother's hospital room. 2 men in dark suits were standing outside the door. They weren't police. He sent men to the hospital, Julian said, his voice deadly quiet. They haven't gone in yet. The hospital security is holding them back for now. But it is only a matter of time. I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, ceramic shards flying everywhere. Lucas, I gasped. Julian was at my side in an instant, gripping my shoulders. We will get him, I promise. How? I cried. We are hiding in the woods. We stop hiding, Julian said. We finish this, today. We left the cabin 10 minutes later. The drive back to the city was silent and fast. Marco drove like a man possessed, weaving through the snowdrifts. Julian was on the phone barking orders in Italian to his lieutenants. He was mobilizing an army. He was planning a direct assault on the Vitti stronghold. No, I said from the back seat. Julian paused the phone halfway to his ear. What? You cannot attack them head on, I said, my mind racing. That is suicide. They are expecting that. They have the numbers. They have the police in their pocket. If you start a shooting war in the streets, the FBI will come down on you, not them. Julian lowered the phone. What do you suggest, consigliere? The word was a mafia term. Advisor. It sent a shiver down my spine. I closed my eyes, thinking back to the gala, thinking back to the conversations I had overheard, the whispers. Money, I said, opening my eyes, hit their money. Julian frowned. That takes time. We don't have time. No, listen. At the gala, I heard Lorenzo bragging to his banker. He was talking about a shell company, Red Star Imports. He said they were moving all their liquid assets there to prepare for the war with you. I leaned forward, grabbing the back of Julian's seat. I remember the account numbers, or part of them. He showed the banker a text message. I have a photographic memory for numbers. It's how I memorized orders at the restaurant without writing them down. Julian stared at me. You saw the account numbers? The Cayman Islands routing code starts with 001, then 458. I recited the string of numbers that had been burned into my brain. Julian looked at me with something new in his eyes. Not just desire, not just protectiveness, respect, awe. He turned to his laptop. He typed furiously. Get me the forensic accounting team, he barked into his headset. Now. I don't care what time it is. For the next hour, the back of the SUV became a war room. I wasn't just the waitress anymore. I wasn't just the fake fiancé. I was the key. I directed Julian's hackers, helping them piece together the puzzle of Vitti's financial empire based on the fragments of gossip I had collected. There, Julian said, pointing at the screen. We found it. Red Star Imports. They have over $50 million sitting there. Freeze it, I said. Trigger a federal audit flag. Make it look like a terrorist financing alert. The bank will lock the account instantly. They won't be able to buy a bullet, let alone pay a hitman. Julian typed the command. Enter. Done. He sat back, exhaling a long breath. He looked at me and grinned, a feral, dangerous grin that made my toes curl. You are brilliant, he said. You are absolutely terrifying. He reached over the console, grabbing the back of my neck and pulling me into a hard kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was a celebration of victory. My consigliere, he whispered against my lips. But our victory was short-lived. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. A video file. I pressed play. My hand started to shake. The video showed a hospital room, my brother's room. Lucas was lying there pale and small in the bed. But the machine next to him, the ventilator. Someone's hand was hovering over the power cord. A voice came from behind the camera, Lorenzo's voice. Smart move with the bank accounts, Thorne, but money can be unfrozen. Dead boys cannot. The camera panned to a piece of paper held up next to Lucas's face. The money or the plug, you have 20 minutes. The video ended. I screamed, a sound of pure raw agony that tore my throat. Lucas, no! Julian snatched the phone from my hand. He watched the video, once his face turning to stone. 20 minutes, he said. Marco, can you make it to St. Jude's in 20? Marco looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes grim. In this snow? It will take 30. Minimum. Drive, Julian roared. Drive like the devil is chasing you, because I am right behind you. The SUV surged forward, engines screaming. I sat there, clutching my phone, rocking back and forth. 20 minutes. My brother had 20 minutes to live. This was my fault. I had played the game. I had attacked their money, and now they were attacking my heart. Julian grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard my bones ground together. We will make it, Elena. And if we don't, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Then I will rip Lorenzo Vitti apart piece by piece, Julian vowed, and I will let you strike the final blow. Dear friends, Elena and Julian have officially become a team. They've embarked on a journey of survival together, but the price to pay could be the lives of the most innocent. If you're still listening, if your heart is still beating, please help me by commenting the keyword accomplice below. Let me know that I'm not alone in this car speeding through the snow. Let me know that there are still companions with me throughout this dark process. Your valuable input is the greatest source of information for me to continue paying for the next part. Thank you. St. Jude's Hospital loomed out of the blizzard like a fortress of gray stone and glass. The lights were on, but there was a strange, unnatural stillness about the entrance. No ambulances, no people smoking near the doors, just two black sedans parked haphazardly on the curb, blocking the main ramp. Marco slammed on the brakes. The SUV fishtailed on the ice before coming to a violent stop 50 yards from the entrance. It is a trap, Marco rumbled, his hand already reaching for the assault rifle under his seat. The perimeter is compromised. I count 4 hostiles in the lobby. Julian did not flinch. He was checking the clip of his handgun, his movements precise and mechanical. Of course it is a trap. Lorenzo wants me to walk into a kill box. I looked at the hospital, my heart slamming against my ribs like a caged bird. Lucas is on the 4th floor, East Wing. If they cut the power to his ventilator, they won't, Julian said, his voice deadly calm. Not yet. Lucas is the bait. You don't destroy the bait until the wolf is in the trap. He turned to me. The dashboard lights cast deep shadows over his face, highlighting the fresh cut on his cheek from the bathroom fight. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. Listen to me, Elena. We cannot both go in the front. I am going to draw their fire. I am going to make so much noise in that lobby that every gunman in the building will come running down to kill me. No, I whispered, grabbing his arm. That is suicide. There are too many of them. He covered my hand with his. His palm was warm, rough, and stained with dried blood. It is the only way. While I keep them busy, you go around to the loading dock. Use the service elevator. Get to Lucas. Lock the door and do not open it for anyone but me. I can't leave you. You have to. You are the only one who can save your brother. He leaned in and kissed me hard and fast. It tasted of goodbye. Go. Run. He kicked the door open and stepped out into the snow. Marco followed him, racking the slide of his rifle. I watched through the window as Julian walked straight toward the main entrance. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He walked with his arms spread wide, a taunt to every enemy watching. He fired a single shot into the air, shattering the silence of the winter night. VD! Julian roared, his voice echoing off the buildings. Come and get it! The lobby windows exploded outward. Gunfire erupted. It was a deafening, continuous roar. Glass shattered, spraying onto the snow like diamonds. I saw muzzle flashes from inside the hospital. I forced myself to look away. I forced my legs to move. I scrambled out of the SUV and ran into the shadows toward the side of the building. The snow was up to my knees, freezing and heavy. I slipped, fell, scrambled back up. My lungs burned. I reached the loading dock. The door was locked. I smashed the glass panel with the butt of the gun Julian had given me. I reached in, unlocking it. I was inside. The hospital corridors were dim lit only by emergency strips. The air smelled of floor wax and antiseptic, a smell that usually meant safety but tonight smelled like a morgue. I could hear the gun battle raging in the lobby. It sounded like a war zone. Julian was down there fighting an army so I could slip through the shadows. I ran toward the service elevators, but then I stopped. If I went up there now, I would be walking into a hostage situation. Lorenzo was likely already in the room. He would have men in the hallways. I needed an advantage. I needed to blind them. I remembered the blueprints. I had studied the hospital layout when I was trying to figure out how to sneak Lucas extra food. The maintenance basement, the main breaker box. I changed direction. I ran down the stairs, my footsteps echoing on the concrete. The basement was a maze of pipes and humming machinery. It was hot down here, smelling of oil and dust. I found the electrical room. The door was padlocked. I didn't have the key. I stepped back, raised my gun, and fired. The sound was deafening in the small space. The lock shattered. I kicked the door open. The main breaker panel was a wall of switches and levers. I didn't know which one controlled the east wing, so I pulled them all. Clack, clack, clack. One by one, the hum of the machinery died. The lights overhead flickered and died, plunging me into pitch darkness. Somewhere above me, alarms began to scream. Emergency generators kicked in, but they would only power life support systems. The hallways, the cameras, the elevators, they would all be dead. I turned on my phone flashlight and ran back up the stairs. Now we are even, Lorenzo. Now we are both fighting in the dark. I sprinted up 4 flights of stairs, my thighs burning, my chest heaving. I burst onto the 4th floor. It was chaos. Nurses were screaming, running with flashlights. Patients were crying out. The darkness was my shield. I moved along the wall, gun raised. I counted the room numbers. 408, 409, 410. Lucas's room. The door was open. I crept closer, my heart hammering in my ears. I peeked inside. The emergency backup light cast an eerie red glow over the room. Lucas was there. He was still in bed. The ventilator was still humming, powered by its internal battery. He was asleep or sedated, unaware of the war happening outside his door. But he wasn't alone. Lorenzo Vitti was sitting in the visitor's chair. He looked relaxed, comfortable even. He held a silver pistol in his lap. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at Lucas. The lights were a nice touch, Elena, Lorenzo said. He didn't shout. He spoke conversationally, as if we were having tea. Clever girl. Julian taught you well? I stepped into the doorway, gun pointed at his chest. My hands were shaking. Get away from him, I said. My voice sounded thin and brittle. Lorenzo turned to look at me. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who held all the cards. Drop the gun, he said. He raised his pistol and pressed the muzzle against Lucas's temple. My breath hitched. No, please. Drop it, or I paint the wall with his brains. I looked at Lucas. He looked so small, so fragile. I slowly lowered my arm. I crouched down and placed the gun on the floor. I stood up, hands raised. Kick it away, Lorenzo ordered. I kicked the gun. It skittered across the linoleum, stopping under the bed. Lorenzo stood up, keeping his gun trained on my brother. Where is he? Lorenzo asked. Where is the great Julian Thorne? Did he die in the lobby? He is coming for you, I said defiantly. I doubt it. I sent 10 men down there, 10 professional killers. Then you sent 10 men to their deaths, a voice rasped from the hallway. Lorenzo spun around. Julian stood in the doorway. He looked like a corpse walking. His shirt was shredded. Blood poured from a wound in his shoulder and another in his thigh. His face was pale, coated in sweat and grime. But his eyes were burning coals of hatred. He held a gun in his good hand, but it was hanging by his side. He looked like he barely had the strength to stand, let alone aim. Thorne, Lorenzo sneered, pivoting his body. He swung his gun away from Lucas, aiming it directly at Julian's heart. Drop your weapon, Julian, Lorenzo commanded, or the girl watches you die. Julian's fingers opened. His gun fell to the floor with a heavy thud. Let them go, Lorenzo, Julian wheezed, leaning against the door frame. This is between us. Oh, it is, Lorenzo agreed, and it ends now. He cocked the hammer of his gun. Goodbye, Thorne. Time did not just slow down, it stopped. I saw every dust mote floating in the red emergency light. I saw the bead of sweat rolling down Lorenzo's temple. I saw the widening of Julian's eyes, not with fear for himself, but with terror for me. Lorenzo's finger began to tighten on the trigger. He was going to kill Julian, then he was going to kill me, then Lucas. I was the only variable he hadn't accounted for. He thought I was disarmed. He thought I was just a frightened sister, a waitress, a fake fiancée. He didn't know about the ankle holster. Julian had strapped the small backup revolver to my ankle in the car, just in case, he had said. The unexpected blade cuts the deepest. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to weigh the morality of taking a human life. There was no judge, no jury, no law. There was only the predator and the prey. And I refused to be the prey. No! I screamed. I dropped to my knees. Lorenzo flinched, distracted by my movement, thinking I was collapsing in grief. His eyes flickered toward me for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. My hand flew to my ankle. I felt the cold steel of the revolver. I ripped it from the Velcro strap. I didn't aim. I didn't close one eye. I pointed the barrel up from the floor at the man who threatened my family. Don't hesitate, Julian's voice echoed in my memory. Hesitation is death. I pulled the trigger. Boom! The sound was louder than I expected in the small room. It was a thunderclap that shattered the world. The recoil jarred my wrist. I watched as a red mist sprayed into the air behind Lorenzo. The bullet caught him under the chin. It snapped his head back violently. His gun fired into the ceiling plaster, raining down like snow. Lorenzo Vitti stood there for one impossible second, looking surprised. Then his knees buckled. He collapsed backward, crashing into the medical cart, sending trays and instruments clattering across the floor. He hit the ground and didn't move. A dark pool began to spread rapidly around his head. Silence rushed back into the room, ringing in my ears. I stayed on my knees, arms still extended, gun still pointed at the space where he had stood. Smoke curled lazily from the barrel. My brother was still sleeping. The ventilator hissed rhythmically. Hiss, click, hiss, click. I killed him. The thought floated in my mind, detached and clinical. I had just killed a human being. I waited for the horror. I waited for the bile to rise in my throat. I waited to break down. But the horror didn't come. Instead, I felt a cold, absolute calm. I felt safe. Elena, Julian's voice broke the trance. He limped toward me, leaving a trail of blood drops on the floor. He fell to his knees in front of me. He didn't look at Lorenzo's body. He only looked at me. He grabbed my shoulders, his grip desperate. Are you hit? Did he hurt you? I shook my head slowly. I lowered the gun, placing it gently on the floor. I killed him, I whispered. Julian pulled me into his chest. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my neck. He was shaking. The great, untouchable Mafia Don was shaking like a leaf. You saved us, he rasped. You saved everyone. He pulled back, cupping my face. His thumbs wiped away tears I didn't know I was crying. "Listen to me," he said, his voice urgent. "The police are coming, the sirens. Do you hear them?" I listened. Yes. In the distance, rising above the blizzard, the wail of sirens was getting louder. "They will find a body," Julian said, speaking fast. "They will find a gun." He reached down and picked up the revolver I had fired. He wiped the handle with his shirt sleeve, then pressed his own fingers onto it. "What are you doing?" I asked. "You were never here," Julian said. "Marco is waiting at the stairwell. He will take you and Lucas down the fire escape. There is a van waiting in the alley." "No," I grabbed his wrist. I pulled the trigger. It was self-defense. "It was an execution," Julian corrected grimly. "And you have a record. They will tear you apart. I won't let you spend a day in a cell." He pressed the gun into his own hand. "I killed him," Julian stated, his eyes locking onto mine. "It was a gang war. I came here to settle a score. You're just a civilian caught in the crossfire." "Julian, no, you are bleeding. You need a doctor." "I will get one, in prison hospital." He smiled, a sad, broken smile. "Go, Elena. Take your brother and go." "I love you." The words slipped out before I could stop them. He froze. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the man beneath the monster, a man who wanted to be loved. "I know," he whispered. "That is why you have to leave, because I destroy everything I touch." He pushed me toward the door. "Go now!" Marco appeared in the doorway, rushing in to grab Lucas's gurney. "We have to move, miss," Marco grunted. I looked back one last time. Julian was sitting in the chair Lorenzo had occupied. He held the gun in his lap. He was waiting for the police. He looked at me across the room, his eyes dark and unreadable. "The contract is over, Elena," he said softly. "You are free." I turned and ran. 1 month later, the coffee shop on State Street smelled of burnt beans and wet wool. It was crowded, noisy, and perfectly normal. I sat by the window, stirring a packet of sugar into my latte. I wore a beige sweater and jeans. My hair was tied back in a messy bun. I looked like every other college student or young professional in Chicago. I was safe. Lucas was in a private rehabilitation center in Wisconsin, paid for by an anonymous donor. He was walking now. He was smiling. He didn't remember the night at the hospital. I had my old life back. I had my freedom. And I was miserable. I looked at the people around me. They worried about exams. They worried about rent. They worried about weather. They were sleepwalkers. I looked at my reflection in the window. The girl looking back at me seemed faded, gray. I missed the color. I missed the red of the dress, the black of the night, the metallic glint of a gun. Most of all, I missed the monster. Julian was out on bail. His lawyers, the best in the country, had spun the hospital shooting as a heroic act of defense against a known criminal madman. The Vitti family had collapsed without Lorenzo crumbling into infighting. Julian Thorne was now the undisputed king of the city. But I hadn't heard from him. Not a text, not a call. "The contract is over," that was what he said. I looked down at my hand. The ring finger was bare. It felt light. Too light. I stood up. I left the latte unfinished. I walked out into the cold March air. I didn't go to the subway. I hailed a cab. "Thorne Tower," I told the driver. The ride took 20 minutes. 20 minutes to decide if I was crazy or if I was finally waking up. I walked into the lobby. The security guard looked up. He recognized me instantly. His eyes widened. "Miss Vance?" "I am here to see Mr. Thorne," I said. My voice didn't tremble. He is in a meeting. I don't know if..." I walked past him toward the private elevator. I didn't have a key card anymore. I stood in front of the scanner. "Override it," I said to the guard over my shoulder. He hesitated, then typed something into his console. The doors slid open. I rode the elevator up those 50 floors. My heart wasn't racing with fear this time. It was racing with anticipation. The doors opened. The penthouse was the same. Cold, glass, white. Julian was standing by the window, his back to me. He was wearing a gray suit, looking out at his kingdom. He didn't turn around. "I told security not to let anyone up," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Since when do I listen to what you tell me?" I asked. He stiffened. He turned slowly. He looked tired. There were new lines around his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. "Elena," he breathed. "What are you doing here? You are safe. You are out." "I tried," I said, walking toward him. "I tried the normal life. It doesn't fit anymore." "You don't know what you are saying," he said, stepping back as if I were a ghost. "Go back to Wisconsin. Go back to being innocent." "I am not innocent, Julian," I said steadily. I put a bullet in a man's head, and I didn't lose a wink of sleep over it. I stopped in front of him. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the ring, the massive diamond with the blood-red rubies. I had kept it. I stole it the night I left. I tossed it onto the glass coffee table. It spun loudly, coming to rest with a sparkle. You said the contract was over, I said. Julian looked at the ring, then at me. It is. Well, I crossed my arms. I am here to negotiate a renewal. His eyes darkened. The hunger was there, buried deep but rising. This isn't a game, Elena. If you stay, if you put that ring back on, there is no exit clause. Not this time. You will be hunted. You will be hated. You will be the wife of a criminal. I know, I said. I don't want a safe life. I want a life with you. I stepped closer until my chest brushed his. I reached up and straightened his tie. The world is full of monsters, Julian. I would rather be the queen of the monsters than a sheep waiting to be eaten. He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. He was fighting his own nature, fighting his desire to protect me versus his desire to possess me. Possession won. He let out a ragged breath. He dropped to his knees. For the first time in his life, the King of Chicago knelt. He picked up the ring from the table. He took my left hand. His grip was iron. This is not a marriage proposal, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. This is a sentence. I will consume you. I will corrupt you. And I will never ever let you go. Promise? I whispered. He slid the ring onto my finger. I swear it on my blood. He stood up and pulled me into his arms. He kissed me, and it felt like coming home. It felt like fire and ice and steel. I looked out the window over his shoulder at the sprawling city below. The lights twinkled like fallen stars. It was a dangerous world out there, a dark world. But as Julian's arms tightened around me, I smiled. Let them come, let them try. The queen was home, and that is the story of Elena and Julian. In the end, Elena realized that fate's hands aren't always gentle. Sometimes they are rough, bloody, and scarred, just like Julian's. But sometimes, those are the only hands strong enough to catch us when we fall. They found love not in the light, but in the shadows, proving that even in the darkest corners of Chicago, a queen can rise if she has the courage to embrace her own monsters. If this story made your heart race, please leave a like and subscribe to Fate's Gentle Hands. Don't forget to hit the notification bell because Fate writes a new story every single day and you won't want to miss where it takes us next. What would you have done in Elena's place? Tell me in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe or stay dangerous.